Let it be known, this was the week the president tried to become a dictator. I know, it sounds crazy, and man, do I hope I'm crazy wrong. But this was the week I discovered a president who sized up an opposition party that was very weak. This was the week that Barack Obama came in peace to rip our Constitution to pieces. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and I know what you're thinking. Neil's lost it. Well, you might be right on that, but I know that on this whole presidential power grab thing, I'm not wrong, not one bit. Now, again, I know that sounds mad, but a lot of folks are mad, very mad, at a president increasingly willing to bypass Congress and bypass something else, the Constitution, to get what he wants, whenever he wants it, and get it fast. Just read this week's, I'll call them takeover tea leaves. Vice President Joe Biden saying the president is exploring executive orders to combat gun violence, to essentially confiscate guns. The Second Amendment be damned. The same president, we're told, now considering executive actions to enact climate change measures. Those opposed be damned. And timely to this whole debt debate going on right now in Washington, the same president whose supporters say the Constitution itself allows him to intervene and raise the debt ceiling on his own. Again, Congress be damned. Added up, I'm telling you, Barack Obama is doubling down. And here's the kicker. With plenty of compliant Democrats in Congress to help. But those Democrats might regret what they're aiding and abetting, because they're the ones who will be fumbling and fuming. Because when Nancy Pelosi pushes a 14th Amendment to give the president the power to bypass Congress on all things debt, she has given him the power to bypass her too. You don't need a $1 trillion magic coin to realize this is nothing less than a high-stakes power grab. Now, it's not unusual for presidents of either party to try. It is very unusual for so many in both parties to lay down and let them do it. All right, here to hash it out, constitutional expert Ilya Shapiro and Washington Watcher Sabrina Schaeffer, as well as the Wall Street Journal's Steve Moore. Steve, a disturbing series of events, to put it mildly.
No question about it, Neil. And look, we have a three-branch system of government in Washington. The president is the chief of the executive branch. That means the president doesn't make the laws. He executes the laws that Congress passes. And, you know, I'm in Austin, Texas today. Here in Texas, everybody's been talking about this. What is with all these executive orders? What gives the president the authority to do this? And the one that I'm most interested in, obviously, is whether the president will try to unilaterally raise the debt ceiling without approval of Congress. And that is the scuttlebutt right now in Washington, that the president is simply going to do it whether Congress authorizes that extension or not. You know,
Sabrina, it's odd that this is occurring the same week we saw the movie Lincoln honored with 12 Oscar nods. Of course, a lot of people pointed to the fact that Abraham Lincoln, the span of habeas corpus went way after and way beyond what constitutional powers he was granted, and critics say this president is essentially doing the same. I always remind people with this flippant comment, I knew Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was kind of a historical friend of mine. This guy's no Abraham Lincoln, nor are these circumstances the same. What do you say?
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think the difference is that Abraham Lincoln had his priorities in order, and one of the real problems with President Obama is his priorities seem to be a mess. Instead of talking about spending control, we're talking about gun control. Instead of talking about solid, long-term economic solutions to help turn around the economy, we're talking about minting $1 trillion coin. This is a president who seems to be sort of thumbing his nose at what really needs to be done in this next term, and instead is sort of doing a power grab to secure his legacy.
You know, Ilya, he's not the first president to try to go beyond an election and take what was a victory in terms of a striking mandate. FDR did it. Richard Nixon tried it. George Bush, in his reelection, tried it. Are there differences here or anything noteworthy here? I mean, obviously he's trying to get past a resistant Congress to a lot of his proposals and this stymieing of a lot of those proposals. Is this the way to do it? Are you worried about the way he's doing it?
Well, of course I'm worried about it. This is why we have three branches of government. Of course, the president, any president of any party at any time, is going to try to expand his powers. The nature of any public official, whether you're a low-level bureaucrat or the president, to do so. But we have in our constitutional system checks and balances, both horizontally in terms of Congress and the federal judiciary, and vertically with federalism. And if courts enforce those structural protections for our liberties, then we'll be a lot better off.
You know, I was just thinking, Sabrina, though, of Bill Clinton when he knew that he would be challenged on some of the executive orders he gave and the executive actions he took. He was quite aware of the distinct possibility that courts would overturn him, which many of them they did. But the damage was done, and he got what he wanted originally, and to undo it, easier said than done after the fact. Is this president's strategy as well?
Well, I'm wondering if this president just feels extra confident. I mean, look, a lot of people thought that Obamacare would be overturned, and it was not.
True.
And now here we are seeing the debris that's left in its wake, and it's not good for the economy or for people's liberties. So I think that this is a president who certainly has a lot of extra confidence. I'm thankful that someone like yourself is actually talking about this, because really the conversation all this week has not been about this power grab or these executive orders, but it's been about a gender imbalance in the second-term cabinet. How unimportant when you consider what we're really talking about here.
Yeah, these executive orders could be piling up like planes at LaGuardia here, Stephen, because there are getting to be quite a few of them. And I'm wondering then what happens, because once the president issues the order, you do it. You do what he says, and departments operate accordingly. It could be months, if not years later, before they're overturned, if they're overturned.
Here's the problem.
So what are you envisioning in this term?
Okay, so here's the problem. I mean, we've been rightfully critical of the president for this power grab, but let me say this, that I think also at fault here are the court systems and the Congress. If the president is encroaching, which this president is doing, on the legislative affairs of the duties of Congress, then it is incumbent on Congress to assert its authority. And now, a lot of the kind of rules and regulations...
Do they go to the court and then say, what do they do?
Well, let me give you an example. Now, you were you were talking about executive orders, but let's talk about a lot of these regulations. For example, on climate change, the Congress, when it passes these appropriations bills, for example, the money that funds the EPA can put language in the appropriations bill saying, look, none of this money shall be used for climate change or whatever it might be. So I fault Congress as well, even the Republicans. If they are concerned about this, which they say they are, they have to get tough with this president and the way they deal with them and the way they spend money and give agencies money.
Ilya, it seems like the administration wants to have its cake and eat it too, though. I mean, it can use the 14th Amendment to force executive privilege on just going ahead and raising the debt ceiling, but ignore the Second Amendment and confiscate people's guns. I mean, I'm being a little flippant there, but to make the point that they pick and choose their battles and the appropriate ammunition.
Yeah, it reminds me of a New York Times op-ed from last week saying we should throw out the Constitution, except for these parts that I like. It very is.
That's right.
Much
I forgot that. That's a very good point.
And the thing is, even if I just said that all presidents have tried to expand their own powers, what is unique to this one is just the amount of government by regulation by these administrative agencies that are seemingly unaccountable to anyone. And even if I just saw a front page article in the Washington Post earlier this week how the last Congress was the most unproductive, they didn't pass as many laws. I mean, that's probably a good thing that they're not passing laws. But the agencies have been the most productive in history. I mean, exponentially, every 4 years, the federal code grows exponentially. And that's really where much of the government is done now, whether we're talking environmental regulation or whether we're now going to be talking about gun confiscation.
Sabrina, here's the crazy...
Neil, can I...
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something about this 14th Amendment issue, because this is actually gaining currency, no pun intended, with respect to many people on the left saying the president has a unilateral power to raise the debt ceiling. And that is craziness. I mean, if you look at what the 14th Amendment says, it says the full faith and credit of the U.S. Debt will be honored. And, of course, it will be even if we don't pass a debt ceiling on time, because the first thing that gets paid, you and I have talked about this many times, the first thing that gets paid because of the 14th Amendment
the lawyers argue that out in court, and that's what gets ridiculous. But, Sabrina, here's what worries me. We've already seen an effective strategy on the part of the White House to marginalize the Republican House and make it sort of like the last part of the negotiating process on the Cliff deal, where it was take it or leave it, and you're going to look like obstructionist if you just leave it. So the House cowered and went ahead and accepted the deal. But they discovered a wisdom in that strategy to not only push the House aside, but maybe bypass it entirely. And I think that's a growing trend. What do we do? What do we say to follow up on it?
Well, I mean, again, I do think that the sort of the growth of this administrative state is what we're all concerned about. I just went through the process of trying to navigate the FDA's prior notification system. It was a nightmare. And now we're watching what's happening with the Consumer Regulatory Agency and housing regulations and what that's going to mean for banks and for consumers. I think all of this, so much is happening behind people, people are seeing. We're not hearing about these, what's going on between the lines, if you will. And again, this is on the onus is on Congress to write these laws in a way that the courts don't have to read in between the laws, and that limits the amount of power that these regulatory agencies actually have.
Well, the agencies are the ones calling the shots, as you folks pointed out in varying ways. Thank you all very, very much. We'll try to keep the country together. In the meantime, you all know that